Is Metropolitan Council. I'm Chair Zelli on August 27th, 2025. I always know when it's 4 o'clock because the room gets very quiet. And I know it's time to pound the gavel. Before we start today's proceedings, I think and I really speak on behalf of everybody probably here, we really need to at least acknowledge or address the tragic events that unfolded at the Annunciation Catholic School Church in South Minneapolis. I think our hearts are heavy. It is shocking, even if it's not surprising in this world. This affects children, staff, families in our own community, and multiple individuals have been injured, so we're deeply saddened by that reports. I think really for our own roles as Met Council, we care so much about community, and this strikes at the heart of community, even though we wrestle with this kind of tragedy more often than we wish. I want to and I know we all feel this way, let's just hold their families, their friends, and the first responders and the public officials that we can relate to well, who are directly affected and dealing with this incredible issue. So, and with that, I'm just going to pause for a minute. Thank you. And the other tradition we have is to read the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. As it turns out, I think every council member here has read it. I'm looking around. Yes, so you know what? It's my turn. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region in the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Iota, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unsolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Iota. The Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Iota, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. Thank you. And with that, we have a robust agenda with some good information items. If there is any disagreement with the agenda, please speak now. Otherwise, I will deem it approved. And we're now at the point of having a public invitation for 3-minute statements from the public for items that are not on the agenda. We did have one person who offered to make public comments. It is unfortunately an issue that is on the agenda tonight. So it is not one that we are going to accept. But if there's any other people coming here, and we only had one prior, then seeing nobody, we'll move into our other business.
Chair, we have the minutes to approve. That's all.
Excuse me?
The minutes to approve. Item 3.
Oh, thank you. There they are, the minutes. We're from it says the month of 0, but it must not be. That's what threw me off.
August 13th.
August 13th.
August 13th, 2025. And with that, is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes? Thank you, Robert.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Perfect. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. On to other business. We have a preliminary 2026 budget and property tax levy. And I bet that's you, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to bring forward business item 2025-169, This is the preliminary 2020, wait a minute. Let me see. It says 2025, it should be 2026 on my talking points, and I was just making sure. So I'm going to make that correction. It is the preliminary 2026 budget and property tax levies. And so I want to make sure we've got the right business item number. Okay, we do, yes. All right. Just making sure for legal purposes
Nope.
it's all in sync because I'm used to making a mistake here or there. All right. So again, this is business item 2025-169 and resolutions 2025-14 through 2025-20, which would allow the council to adopt the preliminary 2026 operating budget and set the upper limit of our 2025 property tax levy, which would be in December, payable in 2026. The proposed preliminary budget has been discussed in the Transportation, Community Development, Environmental Services, and Management Committees and presented to the council on August 13th. The proposed budget is consistent with the presentation to the council. The preliminary budget authorizes an overall property tax levy of $97.98 million, which is a 2% increase from the previous year. Council members have received a copy of the 2026 preliminary budget in brief. It looks like this, summarizing the preliminary budget and the accompanying tables. This is the first step in the council's adoption of a 2026 budget. In October, we will incorporate the capital budget into the unified budget, and along the way with any additional changes to the operating budget, present and adopt the 2026 public comment budget. Based on feedback we received from the public and any additional changes needed, we will adopt the 2026 final unified budget in December. In our final budget, the council could reduce but not increase the property tax levies at that point as adopted in the preliminary budget. The motion then, Mr. Chair, would be that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the 2026 preliminary budget as proposed and in accordance with the attached resolutions and tables.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to thank everybody at the council that have gone deep and wide in preparing all of this information and getting it ready for us tonight, going through all of the committees and back to the council the whole, answering all of our questions. Again, we have great experts in our staff here and appreciate putting this together. And as we move forward to our final adoption, we'll be in good shape. So thank you to all of them.
Thank you. And not seeing any other comments, we are ready, and we had a motion and a second, so we'll approve, because it's a budget item.
Roll call.
It will be before us as a roll call. So, Ginger.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chambliss. Dr. Carter.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Pacheco. Lilligren.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cameron. Morales. Lindstrom.
Aye.
Cedarburg. Jenkins.
Aye.
Lee. Carter. Obisakin.
Aye.
Wolf. And Chair Zelli.
Aye. I believe we have a quorum and we have positive votes, so that budget has been approved. Preliminary budget has been approved, and tax levy. On the consent business agenda, is there a motion and a second to approve the consent business items?
So moved.
A second? Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that consent business items have been approved. On to the non-consent business reports from the standing committees. There are no reports from Community Development, nor the Environment Committee, nor the Management Committee. But last but not least, definitely some reports from the Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Ms.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can always rely on me to bring things. So, Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2026-168 is for Metro Transit Supplemental Security and Trip Agent Services. Metro Transit currently has supplemental security and trip agent services under contract 22P123. This contract will conclude at the end of this year. Contract 24P301 will provide supplemental security officers services for 16 locations, trip agent services on metro routes, roving security officer services at 12 facilities, and the ability to add future sites as needed for all services. A request for proposal was released May 18, 2025. 7 proposals were received on June 18, 2025. Proposals were evaluated using the following criteria: proposal quality, qualifications of the proposer, qualifications of key personnel, service delivery plan, qualifications of the proposed subcontractor, and price. The evaluation panel determined that the proposal submitted by Intercon Security was the most advantageous to the council. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute Contract 24P301 with Intercon Security for supplemental security officer and transit rider investment program or trip agent services in an amount not to exceed $57,400,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2025-178 is regarding the suspension of North Star Commuter Rail and Replacement Service Plan. North Star began operations more than 15 years ago in 2009, providing service to 7 stations between Big Lake and downtown Minneapolis. Since March 2020, COVID-19 and remote work guidance have significantly curbed downtown Minneapolis commuter travel. And while more employers are asking employees to return to the office, work schedules across the day and days of week remains flexible, quite different from the regularity of commuting to work nearly every day of the week during rush hour in 2019. Metro Transit plans to provide more flexibility of travel with rush hour and all-day bus service in the North Star corridor between Ramsey and downtown with the return of weekend service. This responds to a shift in travel market Metro Transit is making and other commuter express corridors around the system. In March, Metro Transit officially discontinued 50 bus routes in favor of providing rush hour and all-day service in primary corridors, some with a shorter distance than prior to 2020, I-35W, for example. This bus service plan does not extend into Sherburne County. However, MnDOT is currently working with Sherburne County to develop bus service for that community. The North Star Metrobus, currently connecting St. Cloud to trains in Big Lake, is planned to discontinue at the service transition. This change in service is difficult, and there are many features unique to commuter rail that customers enjoy. 5 people, both riders and employees, provided testimony against this action at the Transportation Committee. This action significantly reduces the operating costs and subsidy to provide commuter services in the North Star corridor and provides more efficient and flexible service. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the suspension of North Star commuter rail service pursuant to all applicable contracts, agreements, easements, and licenses, and approves the enhanced bus service serving the North Star corridor within the 7 Metro County metropolitan area to be incorporated in network now.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Second, thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mentioned this briefly in my remarks leading up to the motion, but this was a challenging decision. We do know that this was an important part of our network, but we also know that we have to take the time to look at the services we're providing to see if they're efficient and effective. We did that when we did Network Now and did cut the routes that we knew weren't performing. This is not something that any of us is super eager to do. The one thing that we have all asked around this table is if we do this, can we provide service in the corridor? And I believe that we're standing up to that obligation. And again, it's unfortunate, but I think we're doing the right thing.
Thank you for those comments, and I appreciate your work, that of the Transportation Committee staff, both in terms of analysis and outreach and considering alternatives that might be better. As you mentioned, it's not a happy decision, but it's an important decision as being stewards of public resources. Any other comments? All right, with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2025-180 is regarding the approval of transit information modernization software contracts. This item includes contracts with vendors for 7 packages of transit information software and services, such as the Metro Transit Trip Planner and Rider Alerts Manager System, to maintain and enhance the information provided to riders. As discussed at the Transportation Committee meeting on August 11th, a few examples of customer information enhancements anticipated with this procurement include providing real-time detour information and reflecting detour routing in the trip planner, using the real-time detour data to improve next trip departure predictions provided to riders through tools like the Metro Transit website and real-time signs at stops, and having the ability to incorporate the Metro Micro on-demand transit service in Metro Transit trip planning itineraries. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contracts 24P213A through D for transit information software in an amount not to exceed $25,608,547.
Great. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reflect to council members and especially some of our newer council. This is a part of a broader effort that we're doing of upgrading technology and all of these other things. As we looked at the money that came into our system through the new sales and use tax, it was critical to make sure we're doing everything we can to improve the rider experience. And this is one important part of it, providing the rider-facing information. We're doing a lot on the back end to improve the ease of our information. A lot of this is how those two things talk to each other and will really be a vast improvement for our riders.
Great, thank you. I don't think we had a vote. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That action's carried. Thank you, and that concludes our business items. We now have 2 information items, starting with the update on the Regional Climate Action Plan. We have, let's see, Jillian Greenberg and Peter Wilfart. And to clarify, we've had a number of climate presentations from you, which have been great. This is not our internal climate action plan. This is a regional one that we have undertaken from a grant from the EPA, US EPA.
That is correct.
It's just very exciting to hear this work that I know has been over the past couple of years, right? Yeah, great. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, council members. As Chair Zelli alluded to, we are here to talk about our comprehensive climate action plan, which is part of an EPA grant that the Met Council was awarded in 2023. The grant is running from 2023 to 2027, but we will deliver our major action plan to the EPA at the end of this calendar year. Previously, we submitted a priority climate action plan in spring 2024 that went out through public review, and that was kind of the stepping stone to this larger comprehensive climate action plan that we're working on now and sent to you last week. That work draws from the priority climate action plan itself, expanding to be more of an economy-wide look at our greenhouse gas inventory, and adds a number of other elements as well. So it also draws from our work with Imagine 2050 and our community climate collaboration, which Jillian will talk a little bit about as well. So there's a number of required elements for this. As I mentioned, the first 4 are really the quantification of greenhouse gases in the region. So this is not an operational look at the Met Council, but all the inbound, all the emissions that are happening within the 7-county region. And actually, excuse me, this is an 11-county region for the comprehensive climate action plan. So we are also including Sherburne and Chisago counties, and then St. Croix and Pierce counties in Wisconsin, which is part of the EPA's definition of our MSA. So we have a greenhouse gas inventory that we have done. So that is the emissions that we have tallied up until 2022, which is the most recent year of data we have. And then we're also projecting out to 2050 to see where we think our region is going in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We also will set targets, which are based on the state of Minnesota's 2030 and 2050 targets. And we're quantifying what we can do for reduction measures. So what does an action do to our understanding in the region? So those are the 4 really quantification pieces. And then we have 4 other components that we're looking at, including a benefits analysis. So what are the additional benefits to climate action in the region, both in terms of public health, in terms of economics, et cetera. And then a few other pieces regarding to where does the authority to implement these actions arise from, what funding options are available for those, and then a workforce planning analysis that's being done by our partners at DEED. So I'm going to tour, hopefully quickly, through some of our greenhouse gas work, but you can see all of that in more detail in our report. So this is the emissions profile from 2022, broken out into 7 different sectors. You can see that transportation is our largest sector, as we've broken it out here. You can break these down finer and finer into smaller sources, depending what scale you want to look at. But electricity and buildings are also another large contributor in the region, and then we have a few major industrial point sources in the region as well that are large contributors to our emissions profile, whereas waste and agriculture are smaller in the region that we're working on. Of course, this is just the inbound region, so this is just what's happening here. This is not counting the food that we're eating. But we also have natural systems that are doing work to pull some of that carbon back out of the air as well, and we want to highlight those as well. If we look at this same inventory across time, we see one really notable trend, and that's the decarbonization of our electrical grid from 2005 to present day. And Minnesota has, of course, the statute to fully decarbonize our electrical grid and purchases by 2040. So we expect that trend to continue. Other than that, other than a few ups and downs along the way in some of these other sectors, we're seeing relatively flat trends. I will highlight, though, that this is part of a growing region as well, so the per capita emissions, which you can't see here, are also decreasing, so there are some victories in this graph as well. We can also look at what's happening across our different counties, and here we see a number of different things that we could really delve into, but we see that there are certain large contributors. Dakota County, of course, has an oil refinery inbound, so that's that large gray box. But we can see that by and large our counties have slightly different profiles per capita, but for the most part are fairly similar across the region.
May we interrupt you for
Yes.
quick questions? Go
Peter,
ahead.
just a clarification question on the last slide.
Mm-hmm.
The building fuel piece, so I get how transportation, the dip, and then the comeback all relates to people not traveling during stay-at-home times, pandemic. And it seems like temporally the building fuel is like it's during that same time period, but goes the opposite way. And I'm struggling in my head to figure out why. Can you just say a few words on
Yeah.
why that spiked up and then came down?
That peak is, I think, actually 2017, 2018. It was a really cold year, so we just
okay.
burned a lot
So
of
it's
natural
weather
gas.
related, it's not actually
Yep.
the same year as over. Okay.
More
that's
heating.
If it were per capita based on the people actually in the buildings.
Well, that's what I was,
Very high.
right.
Right. That's a zoom in issue, but yep, that was a
Okay.
cold year.
Appreciate
so that is not a COVID related
Thank you.
peak. So we have also, this is new to council, we have also projected these out to 2050 now for the region. This is actually just the 7-county region. We're still working on scaling that to those additional 4 counties. But this is where we're expecting greenhouse gas emissions to go into the future. So again, you see that really prominent decrease in electricity. Transportation also in our business as usual projections is decarbonizing just as vehicles get more fuel efficient, and then there's a slight uptick in building fuel, and then fairly steady in the other sectors.
And this is business as usual without any other kind of aggressive.
Yeah, so this is business as usual and incorporates state policies, so policies that are already enacted, which is why the electricity grid keeps going down there. But yes, before we've enacted any of our strong policies that we could. And on that note, one example of where we're looking to go with this work is in our residential decarbonization. So this is work we have done with a federal data set on what does residential decarbonization look like and what are some policy pathways. So the state's climate action framework is looking at policy pathways that kind of fall in between current policies and a net zero pathway. So these are what we're calling accelerated policy pathways. These are what we view as maybe shorter term policy wins we could achieve that might not get us to net zero, but again, in that short term are really moving us further along. So we don't view that as a goal or a target, but just to kind of understand more of that, again, short-term action we can take. Net zero is a really aggressive and noble target, but it's going to take a lot. So we'll continue to build this out for the other sectors as well. And then I think the last graph I will show is just to kind of show some of the background of this too. So a big element of this is going to be a lot of our decarbonization policies are going to require a large increase in electricity supply. And so this is just showing that. This is kind of the inverse of that previous graph, but similar policies where residential buildings and these decarbonization efforts are going to require a large increase in that electric supply, which is another challenge to all this work, of course. And with that, I will, unless there's questions, I'll turn it over to Jillian.
We can always come back to the data, but I'll keep us moving into the engagement work that we did and then into the reduction measures and some of how this work is tying into other work at the council. So first on engagement, we conducted engagement for this plan through 3 main forums. We have a steering committee for this project that is composed of 13 city, county, and tribal staff members. This group meets quarterly, and they're really helping us ensure that the regional plan is aligned with what they all are working on at local scales across our 11-county region here for this project. They've been reviewing the data elements, they've reviewed the reduction measures we'll share in a moment, and have been providing feedback throughout. The community climate collaboration was our project to engage residents throughout the region. And so we worked with 8 organizations that represented different geographies and communities throughout the 11-county region. The organizations then recruited 10 to 15 members of their community to come to a series of workshops. So through this project, we engaged about over 100 participants in 10 hours of workshops about climate change, learning about what climate impacts might be experienced in their community, and talking about what different actions could be taken. Each of the participants also conducted interviews with other members of their community, and so we had an additional 190 residents in the 11-county region that were interviewed for this project, and each of the groups then developed a final product reflecting their community priorities and the themes that they heard come through in the interviews and their conversations. The final forum for engagement was a workforce work group, and this work group was created very specifically to provide feedback on the workforce analysis that DEED is conducting. This is a required component of this planning work, and we wanted to make sure that the workforce analysis rang true to the people who are working in this field every day. And so this group is composed of nonprofit representatives, labor representatives, local government staff in the workforce development field, as well as private sector representatives. And they're just making sure and providing feedback to make sure that the analysis that is included in this plan reflects their experience. So we have greenhouse gas reduction measures that cover the 7 sectors that you saw in the inventory. And so we'll walk through the first 4 on this slide and then 3 more on the next slide. And we start with transportation. So the transportation measures reflect many modes of transportation and how we can move towards lower greenhouse gas emissions from this sector. These measures and the written sections in the plan that was attached to this item are being reviewed by our colleagues in MTS right now, so you may see some tweaks before the next draft in September. For the electricity sector, there's just one measure here. It's not an area where we as the council have a lot of direct authority, but we want to highlight and make sure that we're aligning with the state's 2040 clean electricity standard. For building energy, there are 4 measures here, and they focus on the improving energy efficiency and increasing electrification in residential buildings and then in commercial and public buildings. And finally, on this slide, we have industrial processes. And the measure here is broader and really reflects the status that making industrial processes more efficient and electrifying them really depends on the technological availability for that specific industrial process, and that technology is at varying different places, and so that'll be a longer term and technology dependent measure.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Jillian, for this.
Yeah.
And just looking at the electricity reduction measures, and I get it, we say encourage energy infrastructure and investments. So what do we envision when we say encourage? Is this that we programatize that or through a more regulatory framework?
Sure. So there are different roles that the Met Council has and then our other stakeholders and partners have in any of these measures. And so there are some where, for example, in encouraging energy infrastructure that supports that clean electricity standard, there's some areas where within our Met Council operations, we already have some solar in our operations. We can look at increasing the way we incorporate renewable electricity use across our operations, but then we're also highly dependent on the state and the regulatory environment that they set up for this measure. And so we'll mention this briefly and the plan gets into it more, but in each of these measures, we outline the implementing authorities, and it walks through state versus regional, local, and then other stakeholders, because we have a range of authority across all of these different actions, and in some areas more than less.
Cool, thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. Good question.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes.
since we're paused,
Peter.
if it's okay, since we're paused on this tab, we talk about renewable energy a lot throughout the whole document, but I'm wondering if we could highlight it here, where we talk about energy efficiency and electrifying homes, like appliances, et cetera, but call out renewable energy
Yeah,
in this
that's a great
particular
point.
area, since we talk about it a dozen times or more throughout the entire document.
Yeah. Thanks, Councilmember Lindstrom, for that feedback. Yeah.
I just had a clarity
Yeah.
question. Deed, is that the, is deed, what is deed? Is it a process or is it an outside entity, a consultant?
Yeah, Councilmember, yeah, Carter, good question, and I'm sorry for jumping to the acronym. It's the Department of Employment and Economic Development, so it's the state agency.
The state agency.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the last three sectors of greenhouse gas reduction measures. We start here with waste, and so in the waste sector, there are two measures, one focused on solid waste, focused on waste prevention, waste reduction, and recycling. The second measure is focused on wastewater, and that measure is being reviewed by our colleagues in environmental services right now, so that also may see some tweaks going forward. In the agriculture sector, there are three measures. The first two are focused on more traditional large-scale agriculture and the emissions that come from those types of operations. And the final measure is focused on the smaller scale local and urban agriculture that we see throughout our region. And finally, we have the natural systems sector, and there are two measures here focused on tree canopy and natural lands and water. And as Peter mentioned, when we looked at the data, these measures are really focused on increasing the ways that we can sequester carbon in the region to offset for the ways that we emit greenhouse gases in other sectors. So in the document itself, we go through a series of pieces of content related to any given measure, and these are really guided by the requirements for this grant. So each measure starts out with a description and a community benefits analysis. In this community benefits analysis, we're incorporating all of the engagement data from the community climate collaboration, highlighting community impacts and equity considerations when implementing any of these given measures. And we also pull out quotes from the workshops and interviews that we heard to really bring community voices into this plan. As we were talking about with Councilmember Lilligren's question, in this section, we go through implementing authority and roles. So it goes through state, local, state, regional, local, and then other actors that may have influence or be important contributors to taking action in any given area. And within the state section, we call out specific agencies that have statutory authority over these different areas. Each measure also will have a greenhouse gas reduction projection. So we saw an example of that with the residential decarbonization that Peter showed earlier, and then metrics for tracking progress. And finally, these measures provide a sense of timeline and cost, and also look at potential funding sources. So the potential funding sources is an area that has been evolving pretty quickly, and we continue to edit and revise that section as best we can to reflect ongoing changes at the federal level. But we know that section is going to be really important both for ourselves and stakeholders throughout the region who are looking at this plan as a resource for figuring out where funding might exist to implement these kinds of actions. Which leads us to the way that this document is connecting to the other work that we're doing in terms of climate technical assistance right now. So while the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan document is an important output from this work, we recognize that it won't be the way that most stakeholders and partners throughout the region interact with it. And we planned this project with the intention of using all of the data and content that we're creating and funneling it into tools for local governments as they go into this comprehensive planning cycle. So in the next round of comprehensive planning, as you may have heard in past presentations, cities, counties, and townships are going to have new climate planning requirements. And these new requirements reflect a state statute change from 2023. And so council staff is thinking about how to put together tools and technical assistance that help communities meet these requirements. So you see here all of the data work, the inventory, the projections, the targets, that work is being funneled into a new tool. The name has actually changed since this slide was created. We are calling it the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Tool, and that scales all of the data work that Peter was sharing at a regional level down to the city, township, or county level. And so communities will be able to see what this looks like just for their community and plan out how different actions would affect their profile. And Peter will be sharing a demonstration of that at next week's Committee of the Whole. So look forward to that. And then the greenhouse gas reduction measures, along with the community impact analysis, funding intersections, and other elements of this content are being translated into a climate action toolkit, which profiles different climate actions a community can take, and that toolkit is being planned for rollout in 2026. So stepping back just to more narrowly focus on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan itself, what do the next few months look like? We're here today presenting the 80% draft, and in September we'll be back with a 90% draft for council review and to open public comment. The public comment period will last from September 25th until October 17th, and then we will be incorporating feedback and public comment into a final draft that we bring to council on November 12th. For authorization to submit the document to EPA. The CCAP is due to the EPA by December 1st of this year. And then throughout this time, we're also planning additional engagement around the draft plan. So the steering committee met earlier this month, and then we'll meet again in late October to review a close to final version of the plan. The workforce work group did not meet earlier today. That meeting has been rescheduled for September 12th, so that group will be meeting very shortly to review a draft of the workforce analysis. And then we will also be re-engaging with the organizations that we worked with throughout the community climate collaboration. We'll re-engage with them during the public comment period to share how the feedback and results from their workshop was integrated into the plan, and to see if they have additional thoughts that they want to offer on the draft. And so with that, we are interested in your reflections and feedback today. If you have questions about any of the content or the data in the plan, about the process or the tools that are in creation, we're happy to answer those questions, and we're particularly interested if you have feedback or reflections on the reduction measures themselves as well. Thanks.
Great work, thank you. I know we'll have questions. Riva.
Yes, I find the greenhouse gas mitigation measures very interesting. I'm learning a lot about how that is done, and I now know that we can sequester carbon via natural systems.
Yes.
Sounds cool. I really appreciate the support of the state and recognizing that it's important to implement this at the local levels, and looking forward to seeing how the cities implement this, incorporate it into their comprehensive plans.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really appreciate this work and as part of the climate work group. Also appreciate how the work is being translated into tools that local governments can use. As you know, now as part of comprehensive plan, it's required to have a section on climate in your comp plans. Before the last cycle, a number of cities and communities did, not all of them did. But what we found over time, when I look at what the local planning handbook did to help these smaller cities, especially like you take some of the rural centers and smaller cities I represent, to have those tools and interactive things to work with to try and figure out how to put some of these things into practice is so valuable. And I think a lot of times we study something and come up with a nice report, but we're taking this and translating it into things that people can actually use, and just really appreciate the overall process.
All right, Councilmember Jenkins.
Okay. So thank you for the presentation. I'm a little new here, so I want to add this, may be obvious to other people, but the goals that we're setting for our communities, are they aspirational, or is there any amount of carrot or stick that may be engaged to help our communities get to those goals?
Yes and yes. Councilman Jenkins, it's a good question. And I think these goals, and especially when we think about the goal of net zero by 2050, it is a goal that's based in the scientific understanding of the best practice and what needs to happen to keep our climate stable for humans and the natural systems we rely on. And it is also an aspirational goal because there are many ways in which the way our society functions right now and the way we are planning for our society maybe isn't quite on target to reach that goal. So that's where, when Peter was sharing the accelerated policy pathway, that's really looking at what can happen in the near term that gets us towards that goal, even though we know that that net zero itself is aspirational. In terms of how we work with communities in their comprehensive plans are not required to set individual targets, even though we've set targets as a region. Setting a target for them would be a best practice, but it is not required. There are many ways where, as the council and across with our partners at the state, there are carrots for doing this work. There are funding mechanisms through the council, and also through a lot of state agency programs that help communities across the state take actions across these different sectors. And there are also ways, especially at a state level, where there are certain regulations that are pushing local governments in certain directions. So it really is a broad range of types of actions and carrots and sticks and ambition, but it all leads and builds up to working towards these really aspirational goals.
I like in the past we have not described them as carrots and sticks, but we develop Met Council tools. And we have some levers. Okay. I like that word too. And also really, and maybe you've mentioned this, but we've been working hand in hand with a whole state process. So there's been 2 grants that the EPA gave, one to us for the metro area, which is now 11 counties, even though we're jurisdiction of 7. It's the MSA, and even Wisconsin too, I think we've worked in. And then there's a whole statewide effort that has been led by the MPCA. Correct. So we've been working closely with that Climate Advisory Committee. So it's a state and metro kind of fit together. In many cases, state regulators have more DNR, MPCA have more levers for regulation than we do.
Well, I look forward to delivering tools to my communities
Yes.
to help with this.
Right. Councilmember Lindstrom, you've been very patient.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Well, one of those tools I know is new and as near and dear to your heart, which is I&I grants.
Yes.
And that is a big-time climate tool that we have. Tree grants, we just gave out, thanks to the legislature, 2 million and change to how many communities? Dozen, couple dozen, several dozen.
14.
14, there we go. Yeah, maybe more in the future. Maybe we'll say dozens and dozens in the future, but 14 communities just in the last month or two. And so a couple of things. And Councilmember Chambliss about carbon sequestration. The way I think about this is, so say you have a pot in your living room and it's full of dirt, and you have a little tree in your living room, and that tree uses carbon to grow and then emits oxygen. And the pot is still the same size, but the tree is getting bigger. And so it is sequestering carbon as it grows, as it gets bigger. So you can think about that like for a forest or prairies, which sequester even more, tons of carbon. A couple of things. I love the youth group engagement, the eight different groups that we engaged. A bunch of them are youth focused. That's fantastic. We paid them. I want to call that out, that they did a ton of work for us, and we paid them for that. And that's great, and I'm glad to see that happen. I'm curious to know about the outreach plan, the communications plan in the next month or so. How are we going to be getting the word out to all the community groups? I want to remind our council members that we have a work group ourselves. I'm sort of looking at the two gentlemen to my left that we get together, Deb and Chai, myself. Councilmember Vento was a part of that. Everybody's welcome to be part of our work group where we talk about these important issues. And so the communication plan, I'm curious about the federal data sets. With federal data being in the news recently, if we've seen any sort of changes coming from the EPA in terms of what they're reporting on. That's number two. And then the third thing goes to your point, Councilmember Jenkins, about aspirational. We've seen an 18% drop since 2005 in emissions. We have a goal for 50% just 6 years from now. That's a big goal. And then we have a goal for 2050 to be carbon neutral. And there's a big amount of time between 2030 and 2050. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering about putting in here like every 5-year goals or every 2-year goals or every 10-year goals or something like that. Goals for 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, 2050. Something like that. So yeah, those were like three things: the federal data set, the communications plan, the goals, and whatever else I just said.
Well, I can quickly speak to the data and that we don't know what the future holds there. Certainly the data sets that exist today are being archived off of .gov organizations, so I think those will live on. But yeah, updating into the future may get more challenging, but there are a lot of data sources out there, so we just have to get more creative, perhaps. And then
Great, yeah.
Okay.
I can start with the outreach. So great question, Councilmember Lindstrom, about the communications plan. We will have a platform set up similar to what it looked like for Imagine 2050 for the public comment period, where we use a portal on the webpage for general community members if they want to read parts of the plan or provide comment on the plan. We are also specifically reaching out to those 8 organizations that you mentioned that we worked with in the first round. We wrote up summaries for each organization and have sent those summaries back to them to make sure that what we understood from their workshops aligns with what they heard as the staff at those organizations. We are looking to see if they're interested and have capacity to organize a feedback session during the public comment period with the folks that were part of those workshops. Some of those groups are still engaging in this, so if you happen to be at the fair on Saturday, I think at 4:30, the 4-H group will be presenting on the work that they put together as part of the climate workshops back in the spring. So check out the 4-H building if you happen to be there. And so we'll be continuing to work with those specific 8 organizations more in depth because of the way that they have partnered with us throughout, but we'll also be doing more general outreach around the plan. In terms of interim goals, I think that's a great idea, and we'll look at the data and what we can create in terms of decadal goals at a minimum, if not more frequent. We have the 2030 and the 2050. Having a 2040 target doesn't seem beyond the scope of our data modeling, but I am speaking out of turn here, so we'll look at that and see if we can even just look at, this is what it would look like if we're gonna reach net zero, this is what this would look like in 2040. Or here are some in certain scenarios, here's where we would expect to be on the route to net zero. So I think that's a great idea. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, when you look in the future, like when we look past 2027, is it projected that we're going to get the same kind of support from EPA that we're getting now, or what is the feeling?
Councilmember Carter, it's a great question, and we don't know. So we have project officer at the EPA that we continue to meet with quarterly, and they're providing support as we work towards submitting this document in December, and what the partnership or relationship with them looks like beyond that, it feels a bit beyond my ability to predict right now. But hopefully we continue to be able to partner, and there are ways where they're continuing to support this work despite other changes happening at the federal level.
Do you have something?
I had one just clarifying question, Mr. Chair. I'll let Jillian's answer stand on the last one. That was good, thank you. For slide 10, where you had the reduction measures list, that was the first of the 2 slides. Those items, I assume, the numbers are just numbering to count how many are there, right? Okay. I assume that to be the case. And the reason I raise it is actually in the transportation area. Just the one piece of why numbering might otherwise matter is a conversation that comes up here a lot, which is just consequently to the way you have them listed. Number 1 comes up all the time at the legislature and other places as why aren't we starting there? But many times number 4 is the place we truly need to start to make the broader changes that allow 2 and 3 to occur. And alongside that, number 1 needs to happen. And there's this weird part of the transportation one in particular where I don't have the same feeling necessarily on the other boxes, but this did, in the world of like working with communities and publicly educating and realizing it has to be more than just electrification of the existing fleet and our existing land use profile. There's a component of the plan where I would just say we should be thoughtful about how we produce that piece and set the tone around conversation so that we do use that role around land use, because that's a big part, Councilmember Jenkins, to your earlier question is, I mean, I think we need to get real with, we have to be more serious than even some of the aspirational components that are currently in the regulatory frameworks around us. And if we don't talk about land use change as a part of that and 2050 is a part of it in this body, that stood out to me. And I appreciate you saying they're not in any order, and that'll be helpful as we talk to other groups going forward.
And because whenever this comes up, I always say, number 2 trumps number 1.
I'm just setting you up.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
One other comment.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the workforce parts of this report that you found? All this is great, but we need people to do it, all right? And that is, a lot of those are HVAC technicians, electricians, folks in the trades. And how are we doing? I think we got a lot of work to do, is my understanding.
That's a great question. I think we're gonna have a lot better answer for you in a month. I'm talking to our deed researcher next week to get an update. She sent us some great stuff to start, but we're looking a little more for that, exactly that. So, you know, there are things like HVAC technicians in there, but we want to learn a little bit more about how that separates into the climate and non-climate world, if possible. So we are looking for those kind of more top-line summary figures from our partners at deed, and we will report back as soon as possible, unless you have a feeling from your work with them.
No, I think that's right. The draft of the analysis will be included in the 90% CCAP draft that comes back to council in September.
We may also fill in the acknowledgements page too. Right now it says acknowledgements, nothing. We'd like to thank nobody for your help on this.
A long list.
A long list, yeah.
It's true.
Great work.
All right, any other thoughts? Thank you both, and everybody who's worked on that, including our own climate working group with Councilmember Lindstrom. I know this is a subject we all really do care about, and it's exciting to see the work that we can do through you. Thanks. Now we're marching to our second item, and I believe Barish is ill today, but we've been hard at work on the SEDS program. I'm just calling it a SEDS. Could call it a REF, Regional Economic Framework, or the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair, members of the council. I'm Merritt Clapp-Smith, a senior planner in the Community Development Division and part of the project team for the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or SEDS for short, and I'm speaking in place of our project lead, Barish, who is unable to present today. I do want to thank her for preparing both the slides and the talking points, which I will try to stick to very closely. So some of you may recall that the council adopted the region's first SEDS in 2020 and referred to it as the Regional Economic Framework, the REF. It's been a while since we have updated you on the project, and we have a few new council members. I'm here today to give a quick refresher and to share our progress on updating the region's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the SEDS. Here's what we'll cover in the presentation. First, I'll start with a brief overview of the SEDS and what it is, and then I'll talk about how the project connects to our Imagine 2050 document. After that, I'll walk through where we are in the process and what we've been working on, and finally wrap up with a timeline and some opportunity for discussion. So let's start with talking about what a SEDS, or Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, is. A SEDS is a planning document designed to inform a region's economic development efforts. The U.S. Economic Development Administration, the EDA, requires these SEDS plans for entities within a region to be able to qualify for U.S. EDA grants and technical assistance. Up until 2020, the 7-county metro did not qualify for EDA funding because it did not have a SEDS document. The council and its partners co-led an effort to produce the metro's first SEDS that was called the Regional Economic Framework. More than just being a requirement, a SEDS document lays out a collective vision for the region's economic development and includes a broad scan of economic development initiatives. A SEDS document has 5 main points. First, it gives an overview of the regional economy, what it looks like, how it's structured, and some of the big trends and issues it's seeing. Next, it lays out the region's top priorities based on input from key stakeholders who shape our economy. The third part focuses on strategies and actions to reach those priorities. It also highlights what's already happening across the region. After that, we look at how these strategies are being put into action and how we'll measure their impact. And last, the document wraps up with a look at the region's economic resilience. What helps us adapt and bounce back from shocks and challenges? For those of you who weren't on the council 5 years ago, I want to give a quick refresher. Back in 2020, we created a SEDS plan that we called the Regional Economic Framework. The plan was developed collaboratively by the Council, Greater MSP Partnership, and the Center for Economic Inclusion, with some financial support from the Ignite Foundation. It was adopted by the Council in August 2020. The plan serves as the region's current SEDS document. It involves an analysis of the regional economy and is consistent with our regional policies and plans. The 2020 Regional Economic Framework, or SEDS, outlined 9 key priority areas. These were shaped by input from major stakeholders across the region. We take a deeper dive into each of them within the 2020 document. Now I'd like to talk about how the 2025 SEDS update connects with Imagine 2050. Met Council regional infrastructure, systems, and policies are foundational to the health and functioning of the regional economy. The 2025 update of the regional SEDS is heavily informed by Imagine 2050 goals and policies, which were shaped by voices from across the region through extensive engagement over several years. As you probably know, Imagine 2050 lays out these 5 big regional goals. And one of those goals is for our region to be dynamic and resilient. That means we're ready to meet both the challenges and opportunities facing our community's economy, things like access, affordability, and choice. A strong, healthy economy is key to helping us reach that goal. A lot of the work we've done for the 2025 SEDS update shaped the narrative that you will find in the Imagine 2050 Dynamic and Resilient section. The work we've continued to do on the 2025 SEDS project influenced the content of Imagine 2050 in several ways. It provided context for economic factors influencing the Council's policies development. It included a regional economic overview informed by a SWOT analysis, strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. And it highlighted the priorities directly relevant to the Council's work. Of the 9 priorities highlighted in the 2020 Regional Economic Framework, or SEDS, 4 tied directly to the Council's regional goals. The ones shown in dark blue are the ones that overlap. These are areas where our policies and plans have a direct impact. Now I'm going to shift gears and give you a quick update on where things stand for our 2025 SEDS update work. We've already written a substantial portion of the 2025 SEDS through our work on Imagine 2050. But for it to be a truly useful living document and not something that just sits on a shelf, we need input from regional stakeholders. That's why we're taking a collaborative approach. We're convening a SEDS committee, interviewing subject matter experts, and we'll host a public hearing and comment period to get input on the draft 2025 SEDS. Additional ways we are engaging will be described shortly. Let's start with the reason why we set up the SEDS committee. First, we wanted to set a regional table for a wide range of key stakeholders. We want the committee to inform the future of regional economic development. And most importantly, we want the committee to be a venue for collaborative alignment of economic development strategies. The committee includes 26 members representing a broad range of stakeholders from across the region. We have people from state agencies, counties, cities, chambers of commerce, industry, utilities, advocacy organizations, and more. A very diverse mix. You can see the full list of participating organizations here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great, thanks, and sorry to interrupt. This
Yeah,
is
that's
really
fine.
interesting, but on this slide, and I'm just reviewing the list of participating organizations, and what I find really interesting is the public sector participation, heavy participation from the counties. And I know some counties, like Dakota County, do kind of organize their local communities' economic development efforts under the county
Correct.
umbrella.
Yeah.
But traditionally, we always hear, well, the counties don't do that, or, the counties aren't, it's the cities that do that, or it's somebody else that does that. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of comment on the quality of the participation. I'm really enthusiastic.
Yeah.
I like seeing them here.
Yeah, and I also want to say, it was really hard to figure out an invite list, which the chair helped us get out to figure out who to bring to the table, because our region is so big and there are so many players that we were just trying to get a representative sample of all these different groups. Yes, cities, even townships, do a lot of good work on their own on economic development, but the counties do offer a lot of support. They help often convene those economic development representatives from across the municipalities in the county, or they offer all sorts of support services for small businesses. So for instance, Hennepin County does a lot of great programming, such as Elevate Hennepin, which does a lot of small business support. Scott County is regularly, on a monthly basis, convening its cities. So yeah, counties are often playing a role to support their municipalities.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Jenk.
So looking at the organizations, and I'm not trying to get you to make it any bigger, but there is one organization I don't see on there that does a ton of research, and that is, do we work at all with Federal Reserve of Minneapolis?
Totally.
Or access their information?
Yes, we do work with them. We do collaborate on data, and we absolutely had that discussion about inviting them. But I think because there's already a lot of that collaborative work,
Well, they've created the data already, so at least we're
Yeah.
taking advantage of that.
yes,
Okay.
yes, they're an excellent source.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
And just adding to this, so I used to work at Greater Mississippi back in the day.
Oh.
And they just had another big meeting with their
Yes.
indicators that came out, which was encouraging. I didn't get to see it or go to it, but that's encouraging. I mean, and Mr. Chair knows this too, being part of Itasca and involved, but this should not be a hard list for us to put together, because this has been ongoing since the creation of Greater Mississippi, since at least 2010, pulling everybody together under their umbrella. And one group in here, I'm just going to say yes to the Federal Reserve Bank. I think if nothing else, it's important that they're on the list so everybody else knows that. And then the other one is the Regional Council of Mayors. So they will pull in a wide swath of those cities from around the region that are urban core, all the words that we use in our comp plan process of what type of city they represent. And they are a great group, and they were designed to bring this very thing to them. So I don't know who on the councils are. Thank you, Mr. Former Mayor over there, Peter, who's our liaison, but they also can tap resources, and I think just also add in a group of cities via that group that I think would not just check a box, but add a lot of robust information into this. And then, Mr. Chair, my only other question is, we were very closely aligned with Greater Mississippi when they were standing up their first regional framework, and I think, probably maybe before COVID came here and presented to us. I'm not sure, I don't even know if we have if we're on the board anymore over there. I don't think so. I think that ended maybe even when I was there. But I guess all I'm trying to say is, how closely aligned are we to Greater Mississippi? Because that organization was stood up to lead this type of work, right? And then I think we're kind of like, that casing, that shell that can come around that too. So if you can explain to me how that relationship has gone over the years, that would be important, just because of what this actually is. And
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I could jump in
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it got confusing in part, in some ways for them.
Yeah.
I mean, the genesis of those 9 initiatives was really fully community engaged, and it actually, I think, began more with Itasca. And then as the robustness of the greater MSP, as the economic kind of partnership driver, how do we kind of create this economic framework, really to help create a plan that could be supported by the U.S. government. And so you come to a regional government, That's us. So that was, in a way, the genesis of getting the Center for Economic Inclusion, Greater MSP, and the Met Council together to create this SEDS. It's actually a SEDS alternative because this is
Yeah.
something very common in greater Minnesota, less in the urban areas. So I'm getting too deep in the weeds, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that there's been a little tension because obviously the Indicator project, which they just had and I was out of town, but I was part of the brain trust that helped kind of vet some of that early on. And you're right, I think some of this is continuing. Kind of the question that some people have asked is who owns this? And I think that the fact that we're actually the government agency for the region, and if we need something that actually comes together, a lot of different voices and ownership comes into it. A lot of information came from a lot of different places, including the Fed. But we're, as a council, are the ones who actually vote to approve it and becomes sanctioned as a government-sanctioned entity. And that's where sometimes, if you talk to my friends at Greater MSP, and they are my friends, they will be like, well, wait a minute, we do this. The fact that Met Council is not a contributing partner of Greater MSP kind of relates to the bylaws we have, where we are restricted from members of chambers and other nonprofit organizations that require dues paying, and so we are actually not. So we are very much like the Fed in the sense of we are a depository of information for Greater MSP. We help quite a bit with that. We do a lot of other kind of collaborative work as individuals, like not just the Fed, but the MAC, the airport, the University of Minnesota, which is listed. They're helping facilitate some of this work. But I think that rather than kind of wait to get the band back together again, the CEI and Greater MSP, this is really the government process, and we have a really robust planning, staff to help kind of organize this, as long as we got the checks from the community partnerships to make sure we're still on track. I hope that's kind of a long-winded explanation, but Ryan, you left the room, but you're wondering if I was going to explain this, but, it was a point of some tension, and I think.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I really appreciate that because people wonder.
Yeah.
And I would also say, because I believe I was still working at Greater MSP when we were trying to compete for federal funding around of our peer and competitor regions, and we recognized we weren't eligible. And it was that phone call or email or visit over to this agency that said, we need a SEDS, and that was the genesis of it because we couldn't bring money into this region, which now we can. So, that was a great beginning of the partnership. And I was actually the investor relations director, and the membership thing became an issue, that this government agency couldn't pay dues. And that was really but I would make a case to Greater MSP at some point that they could just not make that be a requirement if our presence on the board would be helpful. But either here nor there, I think it's, all of this is still here and working, and maybe we're dotted lines to each other and there's some crossover, but you're right, Mr. Chair, if this wasn't happening, a lot of things wouldn't be going, I think, the way they could be because of that connection to the federal money that we can apply for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. And thanks for bringing this up. And I appreciate this pause here. And I feel like I should know this, so I'm a little embarrassed that I have to ask this question. But has our SEDS leveraged any federal funds, any of the EDA funds into the region?
Yes, it has. And unfortunately, the way the US EDA posts the grants that it issues, it's not very easy to search, but I did spend a long evening with Netflix and the spreadsheets from the EDA looking for grants that came into this region. And
No, I want to ask what she was being.
and they're
got us all
right.
curious.
Right, there were a number of grants, and a couple examples. The Medical Alley Initiative, that was, I think, one of the key things that kind of motivated Greater MSP to want to see us adopt a SEDS. Another one was transitioning of the XL power plant on the St. Croix River from coal to natural gas, they got a grant to help with that transition. So those are two examples that I think would, those funding opportunities were opened up by the 2020 SEDS.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I did not know that.
Yeah, but our US CDA representative has communicated repeatedly that he wants us as an organization, once we get this next one updated, to really communicate funding opportunities to people across the region because they love to see more applicants. I think they're kind of competitive, the US CDA reps with one another, so.
Oh, well, good. We want a competitive ED rep.
Yeah,
for our area.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really good news.
I will, I'll share a little bit about some of the outreach we've been doing to municipalities, back to your point about the Regional Council of Mayors, and also acknowledge that although the Center for Economic Inclusion and Greater MSP aren't sort of formal partners on the masthead for the document we're adopting, we have been working closely with Greater MSP staff throughout this process, more so than regular committee members, teeing up kind of data sets. They originally had helped us kind of brainstorm who we might be inviting to participate in the committee, and we've really valued their work. Obviously, they are the leading organization or umbrella for economic development in the region, but our US EDA rep, when we spoke to him a little under a year ago, made clear that the expectation from the EDA was that as the public regional agency, we would lead the effort to update it and be the ones to formally adopt it.
And you know, you could make the argument, why is Indeed being because they're a state agency, but they're statewide, they have other kind of economic programs. I think we're uniquely as a planning agency. And
we asked.
Yeah, and we asked.
All right, should I go ahead?
Please. Yeah.
All right. Let's see where we are here. All right. We've also interviewed experts in each priority area. Their insights are brought into the committee's work. Then we give committee members a chance to respond to those insights in small working groups. Input into the SEDS update goes beyond the committee and the individual interviews. Other engagement efforts include a focus group that we're having next week with American Indian stakeholders, SEDS discussions that we've had with the Land Use Advisory Committee and Metro Cities Regional Planners Advisory Group, and a survey that we recently distributed to over 200 municipal representatives. We sent that out in a number of ways, and Metro Cities was one of our partners in helping distribute that. And finally, the council will open a public comment period and host a public hearing to hear from people who haven't been formally engaged or on the committee to date, and that feedback will be used to shape final document revisions. So to give you a sense of where we're at and what's ahead, here's a quick look at our timeline. We brought on a consultant from the University of Minnesota Extension in March 2025, and they've been leading the committee meetings, interviewing the experts, and are drafting the SEDS document. In April, Chair Zelli invited 30 stakeholders to join the committee, and 26 accepted the invitation, which we thought was a strong turnout, and we're happy with.
Yeah, the four that didn't
We want the
come,
list of the four,
we
please.
know, we
Yeah.
know who they are.
Yeah. We started the committee meetings and experts interviews in May, and so far we've completed 16 interviews and 4 of the 5 committee meetings. The final meeting is scheduled for September 19th, when we'll gather feedback on the draft report. Our consultants will then revise the draft based on the feedback and present it to Committee of the Whole for review sometime in October. I think that's our tentative plan. And that input will then be added to the document before it is open for public comment in November. We're aiming to bring the final version to you for endorsement and adoption in January 2026. So I want to mention that we're working on a very tight timeline. Our current SEDS officially expires in a few days. There will be a gap between when our current SEDS expires and when the new one is officially adopted. During that time, entities in the region are not eligible for EDA funding. We're doing everything we can to keep that gap as short as possible. And at the same time, we're working hard to move things quickly without cutting corners on the quality of our outreach. And with that, I want to thank you, and I'm happy to answer any other questions or hear more feedback from you. There are a few questions that you might think about for the discussion. One, do you have any questions about the steps in the process of updating the SEDS and the Met Council's role, which I think we've discussed a bit already? Do you concur with advancing and updating the 9 strategic priorities that were identified in the 2020 SEDS? And as the chair shared, those priorities built upon the work of a number of organizations in advance of the 2020 SEDS. What additional information would be helpful in preparation for bringing the 2025 document for formal consideration by the council this fall? And finally, do you have any other questions or comments on this?
Any questions, thoughts?
A comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like, is it Barris? Was thinking
Barish.
of me and council member
Yeah.
while she was putting this together. No, thank you. This is a great eye-opener. I just love when they all get together and start talking and Ryan has something to say. I'm always learning here. The reason why I'm quiet is I'm learning. Yes, I don't ask tons of questions, but I just want to say thank you for this. This has helped me a lot. Like, things are now starting to make a lot of sense. And I was going to ask a question, but you put it in the slide here. If you've talked to American Indian focus groups, you're doing that already. And the Land Use Advisory Committee, which is important. You're already doing that. So I'll be quiet and let others speak. But well done. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for this.
Thank you for your comment. Any others? Robert?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks. And I agree with Victor. This is just, it's really exciting. And, I was here when we were partnering with Greater Manhattan MSP, and, the goal was to get this in place so we could leverage some of these federal EDA funds in. And so it's good to hear that some have come in. I think the 9, what do we call them? The 9 priorities?
Priority areas,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think those are right on still. But one thing that occurred to me as we were presenting, and in a couple of the priorities, we kind of touch on this sort of directly or a little more indirectly, but the talent, migration and retention, and the new climate economy. But for me, just kind of, even in 5 years since we've done this, climate issues have kind of rapidly evolved, right? We have incredible air quality issues here, for example, and as people are looking where to move and in a shifting climate scene, I feel like that could be part of talent, migration and retention, and of course the new climate economy directly relates to that, but that's about building out an economy. But I just, not to change any of these priorities, but just to, for me, it would be helpful to see consideration of how rapidly our climate is changing here.
Yeah, thank you. And there is a hint at some point in the draft so far that one of the qualities that might attract people to migrate here is shifting situation with the climate.
Sure.
I do want to note that in the previous round, climate was a required section to be addressed in SEDS documents. That requirement was dropped this spring. We asked our US EDA rep if that meant that we couldn't talk about it. And he said, no, consider the US EDA requirements to be what you need to be sure you want to talk about. If there are other things you think are important to discuss, then please do so.
Well, thanks, that's helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Dr. Carter?
Yeah, my question is, I like these strategic priorities you have here. I'd be interested to see the goals related to them. Maybe you don't have that yet, but
We're working on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my interest, because I know it looks like some of them are going to be a lot easier than others. Of course, it's always like that, but I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's so much happening in this region, and, economic development, there's just all sorts of arenas in which activities are happening. So what we just were recently talking about is how do we take sort of this very comprehensive set of information we've gotten about things we should be working on, activities that are happening, and kind of draw out a few to the top as real highlights of the work here.
I was going to say Dr. Johnson.
Thank you for that promotion. That just makes me feel like I can talk now. No, and so I'm on our comprehensive economic development strategy that's on our website. I'm just trying to figure out, if anybody wants to read the first one that we did, there's a link still somewhere, right?
Yes,
Okay.
there should be, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody is interested, but it's somewhere on our website, and I'm on the thing looking for a link, but I only can see background. and stuff like that.
We created a new webpage called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and
Yeah.
I thought we had a link to the 2020 on there, but if not, if that's not easily found, we should add it.
Yeah, if you could add that. And for, and I'm going to go back and read it too. And I remember the urgency around that. If you were here, you remember that urgency to get that out, because there was actually a grant that I think we were trying to go for, and so we were under that. And I'm going to just say this too. It was interesting for this council to read through that, because we recognize in this region our strengths, but we also acknowledge our weaknesses, and we look at weaknesses as opportunity. And boy, there's just a lot of opportunity, not just in our region, but across this country, right? And so as we were writing that piece and then editing that piece, and I'm gonna use my words, these are my words, but it seemed rosy language all the way through it. And you want that, but we also knew that it's not necessarily a sales pitch, but it's really trying to let people know that we know what we're really good at, and we want to get better, and we know where we aren't doing so well. And some of us were trying to actually put some of that language in there so that we weren't walking away from things that are going on in this region that we aren't necessarily proud of. And so I don't know how this one will be worded, but just some history and context of how we wrestled a little bit at the end to make it be a very positive piece, but also acknowledging the struggles that we have here, and we're working on that. So I only say that because it was, at least for those council members at that time, something that we put a lot of time into as advice. So I'm just giving anybody a heads up in case, however this one comes out, there's a little history in some of that too.
It'll be similar this
Okay.
time, yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Mr. R.A.
I have just one inside baseball question that it matters to the people on the table, and it may be clear there, but the slides, I didn't quite see it. So are we formally doing a SEDS equivalent or a SEDS? Because there's like this definitional thing at the federal level, and this matters sometimes to stakeholders. And I was wondering if you could clarify that for me.
Yes. The Congress officially votes and designates districts in our country as eligible EDA districts. Their geographies are defined.
MSAs?
They're these SEDS districts. They're given funding to help organize their areas that have economic distress. That's who they're designating. They give them funding. They are to help organize efforts to improve their economy. They are required every 5 years to update their SEDS document to keep them eligible. We are not an officially designated district because our economy is pretty strong compared to a lot of places in the country. But the US EDA determined that there was still good reason to be able to make funding available even if you were in areas that were not formally designated as a district. So they created this mechanism called a SEDS alternative. So it's the ability for places like ours that aren't designated to go through the same type of work and follow the same requirements to create this SEDS document. If we do so, and if it's formally adopted, then that opens up our region for funding opportunities. So it's called a SEDS alternative. Technically, we don't use that language because it confuses people who don't know all the backstory.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, that's helpful to just hear you share it that way. Because to the chair's earlier comments, like the language matters to groups as they're talking about economic frameworks and strategies for
Yeah.
the region. And so hearing you say that is helpful if we're in conversation with others about exactly
Yes.
what this is and where
Yes.
it fits and how it builds on
Yep.
other regional plans as we go forward.
And I really appreciate you saying that, and nobody's explained it as clearly as you just did.
Yep.
But
That
I
was really
think
good.
that it's important for us to all know that, because
Yeah.
we will occasionally hear others say what, and.
Right,
No.
right.
It's for our intents and purposes, it is a sense, but.
Yeah. And can I give one last plug? Councilmember Johnson mentioned that Greater MSP just released an update of its regional indicators. Those are on their website. They're very interesting. I encourage all of you to look at them. It shows progress for better and for worse across many different measures for our region, and they're really interesting, and that's certainly a lot of the data that we've been using in our conversations as we're developing this update. So check out the regional indicators on the Greater MSP website.
For those who aren't wonky enough to be engaged in that work for numbers of years, it is a data set, particular various areas, comparing the Twin Cities region with, is it 12? It's
11 other peer
11 others,
regions.
so it's 12 altogether. 11 other peers, and kind of how we rank. And
Yeah.
being that we're all competitive a little bit, but also interested in learning, this region we think is robust, and it is, and has tremendous advantages, but we also have areas where we're behind, or areas that we need to focus. And that's what helps create all the stakeholders and civic kind of interest, business, government, all the entities to kind of be aligned on some of the efforts that we need to be pursuing, which is where I think our Imagine 25 is kind of spot on in many cases, but it's a good document to read and look at. It's on their website. Yeah.
I know we're busy and we've got probably a long list of things for our council of the whole meetings, but it would be really fascinating to have somebody from Greater MSP present to us. It's been a long time. I know they're busy, but since they just released that, and for our group and what we do, and as we're heading into 2020 or 2050, I think it'd be kind of cool to see how that works. And it is, yes, definitely peer and competitor region comparison. And also, I think we're still a 15 county metropolitan statistical area. Did it go to 13 again, or do you know?
I can't remember where their indicators are at, if they're at the 13 or 15 county level.
And that's how the region is defined for Greater MSP. So you're probably
Yep.
thinking, why aren't they 7 counties like us? Because it's federally defined, and that means that over 50% of the people in those counties are driving into the central core, so they then get pulled into the metropolitan statistical area. And that's how all the other regions are defined too. So they're a little bit different than us, but there's still enough within that data set to really, and now that we've done several years, and there needs to be a lot more years to see big trends, but it's fascinating. So I don't know if, I didn't know about it until I saw it all on social media, but it's just cool stuff if you want to, you do it as a group.
I think
or
it's
if
a great idea. We should get Nathan or even Julia, to come and present. And I think it'd be relevant. I'll sit in the audience listening.
We'll test you on the measures. They have 10 years of data now too, which is the other notable piece. Meredith and I sat directly next to each other at the rollout presentation day, and we had some others there as well. And so it's a piece of work that we care about, and we try to integrate in with our work. And because Nathan's working on the SEDS here, this is an easy connection point for us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You did a
thank
great
you very
job.
much.
Excellent.
Wish Marisha our best, and
Yeah.
congratulations on all this
Yeah.
great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our meeting. I don't have any additional comments, although I'm looking for the next 2 weeks. Anybody else have any additional information they'd like to share? How about Mr. Regional Administrator?
I'll thank Metro Transit Police. They've been embedded with Minneapolis today. These things touch the entire organization a lot of different ways. And so we're not done sorting through it all, but appreciation to everyone who's been involved today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And our Chief Counsel, George?
No update from the General Counsel's office.
All right. Well, with that, enjoy the evening, and that was really interesting information. So this meeting's adjourned.